In the dense black of the Vietnamese jungle, the sounds of the night seemed to swallow everything. An American soldier, his uniform stained with mud and sweat, moved with a fluid grace, almost a shadow himself. The green glow from his infrared scope painted indistinct figures ahead, carving a path where only darkness had been. With a subtle shift, his expression hardened. When night falls, it's like stepping into a new world. The darkness isn't a shelter. It's a hunting ground, he recalled, his eyes seeing only through the technology that would radically alter the patterns of combat. It was 1967, and the war in Vietnam was about to enter a new dimension where the ability to see in the dark would become the key to survival. Deep in the heart of the jungle, the tension was thick enough to taste. Combat units were on high alert, poised to strike the Viet Cong, who lay hidden and ready to ambush. The soldier, a new transfer to the unit, couldn't help the knot in his stomach as he gripped his M16 rifle. He was about to experience the night hunt, where night vision promised to transform the battlefield, giving the Americans an advantage that felt like something out of science fiction. The sound of approaching footsteps sent a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. I wasn't sure what to expect. Being able to see the enemy made everything different, but it also put me on edge. I didn't know if I had what it took, he confessed, reflecting on the mix of anticipation and fear. The introduction of night vision into the United States Armed Forces wasn't just a technological shift, it was a strategic upheaval. Developed under the pressures of the conflict, this technology promised a decisive edge in an environment where the Vietnamese excelled at guerrilla tactics. The enemy, perfectly camouflaged, using their intimate knowledge of the geography and vegetation, had always been a formidable challenge. The new tech allowed soldiers to see beyond the limits of the human eye. With the ability to detect movement and targets in the most adverse conditions, the Americans knew they were armed with a tool that could redefine their role in the war. But there was an underlying challenge. Every new tool brought the promise of victory, but also the weight of fear and uncertainty. As the soldier pushed forward, dust kicking up under his boots, his senses were on fire, alert to any unusual sound. The VC were out there ready to defend their ground, but now the night offered the American unit a new chance. The soldier wondered, how would their adversaries react to this new wave of warfare? The unpredictable nature of battle made the already challenging dynamic even more complex. As he braced for the confrontation, images of past firefights flashed through his mind. He remembered buddies being cut down while fighting an enemy that always seemed to be one step ahead. With night vision technology, the hope for a turning point became palpable, almost tangible. But the true trial by fire was yet to come. How would the impact of this technology in night combat alter the power dynamic? The electricity in the air told them they were about to find out, and the decisions made on this night could change the course of the war. A whirlwind of emotions engulfed every soldier. With the fight drawing near, the soldier felt the weight of the gear on his back. Each piece of equipment was a promise of protection, but also a reminder of the lives on the line. As he raised his weapon, he was keenly aware that the line between life and death grew even thinner under the veil of the dead of night. The Viet Cong were there, armed not just with rifles, but with knowledge of the terrain and cunning. The night battle was about to begin, but who would truly have the upper hand? Adjusting his scope for a better read of the terrain, he took a deep breath and waited. The distant chop of helicopter blades marked the mission's start. A switch flipped in their minds as the attack order finally crackled over the radios. "Move out," the commander's voice echoed. Hearts pounded. The soldier was about to enter a new era of combat where technology wasn't just support but a lifeline. Anticipation was everything. What would the hunt be like now? The battle loomed, and the shadow of fear followed every step they took into the vast jungle, where certainty and doubt became one. The coming clash was more than a test of skill. It was a testament to the evolution of the battlefield. The soldier's eyes shone with determination as he whispered to himself, "Let's see who really owns the dark." This mission would mark the beginning of something that would affect generations to come. In the 1960s, as tensions in Vietnam escalated, the desperate need for a tactical advantage became increasingly clear to the US military. Night warfare had always been a challenge. For the Viet Cong, The darkness was an ally, concealing their movements and enabling stealthy ambushes. The introduction of night vision was, therefore, a game-changer, raising the question, how could they turn this hostile environment into a favorable battlefield? Night vision technology, initially a project conceived by brilliant minds in military labs, had evolved from work done during World War II and the Korean War. American engineers were determined not to leave their forces vulnerable to the Viet Cong's cunning and experience. Devices based on light amplification allowed soldiers to see in what was once the invisible. The first-generation devices, like the ANPVS-2 Starlight Scope, were tested under controlled circumstances, providing an unprecedented view of the dark Vietnamese nights. These devices worked like electronic eyes, amplifying available light by up to 10,000 times. The result was a surreal scene. What was once a completely black canvas, hidden by the night's camouflage, could now be transformed into a vibrant panorama of shadows and silhouettes. The experience of a clerk, pulled from her desk to witness a demonstration, exemplified this revolution. I never imagined seeing in total darkness was possible. It was like having a superpower, even if you weren't some hero, she said, reflecting on her experience. Though initially gripped by a fear of the unknown, the excitement over this new capability was contagious among the soldiers. This technology was introduced at a critical time, as nocturnal operations were on the rise. While the world's eyes were on its application, the challenges of the Vietnamese jungle also tested the limits of the innovation. The troops, initially thrilled, would soon face the complexities this new era of combat brought. A struggle between tradition and modernity began to unfold, with the Viet Cong adapting quickly to this new threat, using their knowledge of the terrain to shield themselves from attacks. They're like ghosts. They know everything about this jungle. This is where they have the advantage, one soldier pondered, feeling the difficulties of the new landscape firsthand. The first night missions led to a tactical showdown. This innovation sought not just to win a battle, but to fundamentally rewrite the rules of the game. Training and preparation worked in concert with the new technology, with each soldier becoming part of a larger, coordinated body with common objectives. Strategically, the U.S. Army relied on meticulous planning and operations focused on the use of night vision, with its leaders ready to face unexpected adaptations. Constant developments were made. Seismic and operational sensors helped overcome limitations, an advance that sometimes seemed on the verge of impossible. In the search for solutions, traditional tactics were revisited and adjusted to incorporate this new tool. Troops were advised to use pressure plates and sonar in coordination, helping to detect movement when other options weren't viable. Communication between soldiers in the dark became a vital skill, where verbal commands had to be swift and reliable. The Viet Cong, aware of the new American advantage, began to invest in adaptation. Incorporating new camouflage techniques and night ambushes, they proved to be a difficult opponent to defeat. "We learned quickly to move like phantoms in the night," said a Viet Cong commander. To him, the war had always been a chess match, a tactical fight where strategy could be more valuable than technology. And for the Americans, each passing day showed that the battle for nocturnal supremacy would be as intense as any other. Expectations grew as the new technology proved effective, but there were still pending questions. Would this weapon be enough to turn the tide? Were the U.S. forces prepared for what came next? In the minds of the officers, uncertainty hung like a thick cloud. Despite the high hopes, the real test was fast approaching, carrying with it the seeds of an intense and strategic struggle where shadows and light would vie for control of the night. So even as night vision was a powerful new ally, the feeling that the battle had only just begun remained. The soldiers' hearts beat to the rhythm of a constantly changing war, where the cunning of both the Americans and the Viet Cong would be tested. They were ready to explore the horizon of possibilities this new technology promised. What would be the next moves in the wargame unfolding in the darkness? The first night operation using night vision was set. It was a moonless night, the sky hidden behind a curtain of dark clouds, and the humidity in the air made the atmosphere heavy. The American soldiers, equipped with their light amplification devices, waited anxiously at the starting point. The colonel, with a determined expression, projected a map onto the muddy ground, pointing out strategic locations. "Remember, The night is our ally. Owning this darkness means owning the battlefield, he ordered, his firm voice echoing among the men. The accelerated heartbeats in the night breeze were a reminder of ancient hunts, when every movement could mean life or death. The soldier, who had now become an extension of the technology, checked his gear. The infrared scope cast a soft glow, a sign that it was ready, but fear still crept in. The unknown itself made the adrenaline more intense. They knew the Viet Cong were out there lurking, a trap waiting to be sprung at any moment. When the order to advance was given, the unit moved like one shadow in the dark. Each step was a mix of hope and a pit in the stomach, a blend of the predator's drive and the prey's anxiety. The soldier could hear the whispers of his comrades passing commands that, though hushed, reverberated through the trees. Night vision transformed the landscape into a spectacle of shapes and shadows, revealing the invisible. The outlines of trunks and foliage became distinct. The jungle, once oppressive, was now a mapped territory in his mind. The tension in the air was almost electric when the first ambush hit. As the troops moved, a soldier saw movement to his left and flipped on his scope. It was a group of Viet Cong, ready to pounce. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1, light 'em up!" The sound of gunfire shattered the night silence. The glow from the scopes revealed the enemies in their camouflage, caught off guard by the soldiers' resolve. The night fight had begun, and the voices of command and screams of pain mixed into the cacophony of the clash. Bullets crisscrossed the air, and the smell of cordite filled the space. The troops took advantage of the clarity provided by the night vision, hitting their targets effectively. "It's like hunting in pitch black, you see what they can't," one soldier reflected, describing the terrifying effectiveness of the new technology. The Viet Cong, realizing their disadvantage, tried to react, but the precision of the American fire demolished their stealth tactics. It was the moment technology became more than an advantage. It was a psychological weapon that destabilized the enemy. The battle, however, was not easy. Fierce firefights broke out in every corner. American troops faced the fierce resistance of the Viet Cong, who, even against the technological disadvantage, fought back with improvised tactics and a deep knowledge of the terrain. The movements of both sides resulted in a cat-and-mouse game, where every shadow could hide a new attack and every light a target. They were like ghosts in the dark. "Even with the scopes, you still felt the need to look over your shoulder," a veteran said, remembering the tension that permeated every move. In a surprising turn, a group of Viet Cong launched an attack on the rear guard, where some soldiers were unprepared. The sound of gunfire mixed with urgent shouts as the unit quickly reorganized. The harsh reality of night combat began to reveal its weaknesses, and in that moment, the soldiers were reminded that war wasn't just about technology. It was a fight for survival, a test of courage and skill. When the firefight finally slowed and the heat of battle cooled, the troops gathered, breathless and hardened by the night's experience. They had taken the territory, but the victory was marked by deep wounds and the knowledge that every advance was followed by a new challenge. "It wasn't just the night vision that helped, it was the courage of every one of us," a soldier exclaimed as he regrouped with his comrades. They walked away with their morale battered, but ready for whatever came next. The lesson was clear. War in the darkness was more than a matter of technology. It was a dance between light and shadow. As the Viet Cong adapted to the new reality, the soldiers knew this was just the beginning of a growing struggle. Victory in this fight waged in the shadows was now closer, but the final battle was still to come. How would each of them face this new and terrifying world of possibilities? The pressure mounted with each operation in the nights that followed. The initial euphoria of success didn't last. Night warfare now demanded constant intensity, where tension became a state of being for the American soldiers. With each attack, the ability to react quickly and maintain vigilance became more crucial. The Viet Cong, leveraging their knowledge of the terrain, adjusted their tactics, lurking, striking, and vanishing into the jungle like phantoms under the cloak of darkness. The combat that once seemed promising now had a bitter taste, revealing the limits of technological superiority. On one particular night, under a thick blanket of clouds, a new mission was launched. The colonel gathered his unit in a dark clearing, lit only by the rustling of the trees. He laid out an ambitious plan to deliver a direct blow to a Viet Cong base known for its remarkable resistance. "We have intel they're staging an attack. We need to cut the head off the snake," the colonel explained, determination shining in his voice. However, fear and doubt haunted the soldiers' faces. They knew the base was a well-defended fortress. Drawing on his experience, a grizzled old colonel whispered to a young soldier before the advance, "Remember, kid, the tech isn't a magic bullet. It's the man behind it that counts." As they moved out for the attack, those words echoed in the minds of the men who formed the elite force. The silence of the jungle was cut by hurried footsteps, and the rising rhythm of their hearts demanded focus. The unit was now in combat mode, their scopes reflecting the outlines of the trees ahead. As dusk settled, a different aspect of the fight revealed itself. The colonel signaled for the soldiers to prepare, and from then on a deadly silence fell over the area. When the attack began, the night vision turned the scene into an explosion of color and sound. The soldiers fired in unison, and the base was suddenly plunged into chaos. The glow from the scopes lit up the battlefield, a horrifying spectacle. The confrontation that followed unfolded in a devastating frenzy. "Weapons free, push forward, the colonel's voice echoed, guiding his troops ahead. But what had seemed like an opportunity to secure a strategic victory quickly devolved into brutal close-quarters combat. The element of surprise was gone, and now the game became a matter of attrition. The Viet Cong, though technologically disadvantaged, were resilient. Elements of the terrain, knowledge of escape routes, and the ability to work in small groups proved fundamental. The American soldiers soon discovered that even night vision, their promise of superiority, couldn't ensure total dominance. Shots crisscrossed the air, screams and their echoes mixing in a clamor that repeated with every move. A soldier, desperate after seeing a comrade fall, yelled, "We need cover! Fall back!" The order was clear, but panic had a price. In the heat of battle, the colonel lost contact, his men now scattered, each seeking their own path through the chaos. The Viet Cong began to counterattack. In a tense moment, a Viet Cong machine gun opened fire on a group of soldiers struggling to hold the line. It was an intense firefight, and in an instant, an American soldier was hit, the roar of battle turning despair into a surge of action and recovery. "We can't let this happen," another yelled, feeling the pressure on his shoulders as he pulled his buddy to safety. When the dust began to settle, it seemed both sides were fighting for one last breath of courage. The fight was not over. The American units had been hit hard, but the Viet Cong's resistance had exacted a heavy price. The colonel, finally managing to rally some scattered troops, yelled, "We need to complete our mission." The night wore on. The sounds of gunfire, cries of pain, and the urgency of tending to the wounded filled the air. The fight for the base dragged on. Even as the soldiers moved, a growing doubt permeated. This victory, however much they saw the value in fighting bravely, might come at an unimaginable cost. Every step is a push toward the future, but at what cost? A visibly shaken soldier reflected amid the chaos. How would each of them face the weight of their decisions that night? The battle for nocturnal supremacy was still far from decided, and the jungle, a silent witness, became an increasingly sinister enigma. They were ready for the next move, but the shadow of uncertainty hung over them all. The twilight faded into an oppressive darkness, and the battle for the Viet Cong base continued to unfold. The American troops were in a relentless fight to restore order and cohesion, but the combat provided a brutal test of endurance and strategy. Every corner seemed to hide a new ambush. The Viet Cong, acting like shadows in the night, continued to move stealthily, leveraging their unsurpassed knowledge of the terrain and using every tree trunk and leaf for cover. "Hold the line," a sergeant shouted, his voice cracking through the chaos, but the stress of the situation was palpable. The unit had to be able to pull back and regroup before the cost became irreversible. With limited visibility, the use of night vision became a task both crucial and risky. The images that appeared on the infrared screens were often distorted. Shadows danced like specters, and sometimes what seemed to be an enemy was a friend, and the confusion made advancing more and more complicated. The colonel wasn't just fighting the Viet Cong, he was fighting the elements. In a swift move, he decided he needed to concentrate his offensive on a single vulnerable point. Bursts of fire from the American weapons lit up the shadows, revealing the silhouettes of the enemy. "Now!" he yelled, leading his unit in a coordinated attack on an area where the defenses seemed weakest. As they advanced under the colonel's command, the shadows seemed to leap out in response. The sound of bullets slicing through the air brought a sense of terror, but also of hope. The chance of victory seemed within reach. The shots were answered with the crack of Viet Cong rifles, entangling the American soldiers in a disorienting crossfire. The colonel, now in a central position, knew the next few minutes would be decisive. Once again, the fighting intensified. A young soldier named James, with only a few weeks of combat duty under his belt, saw his comrade go down in a hail of gunfire beside him. Desperately, he threw himself into the darkness, dragging the man to makeshift cover with the failing strength of his muscles. The heat radiating from the wounds was terrifying, and guilt began to eat at James. "I can't let this happen to anyone else," he promised himself, adrenaline pushing him to his feet again, weapon in hand. He spotted a group of Viet Cong maneuvering strategically at the edge of the clearing. The night vision intensified every detail, the camouflaged uniforms, the focused faces, and the determination they also showed. "It's now or never," he thought, as he settled in to take his shot. Sweat dripped into his eyes, mixing with the darkness of the jungle, and a scream echoed somewhere in the distance, a reminder that there was still life behind those gunshots. The bullet sang again. At this critical moment, the American units launched a massive offensive. Facing such a bold move, the colonel realized that technological superiority and powerful coordination would be the key to a favorable outcome. "Push forward! Don't stop now!" he shouted, a sound between a roar and a scream, echoing in the frenzy of battle. The American troops reacted, firing toward the Viet Cong, who, even at a disadvantage, displayed tenacious resistance. The shots came from all sides, but something was different. The troops were organizing, reaching for a goal that had become a desperate struggle for survival. The colonel felt that in this uncertainty, there was a ray of hope. However, this was no time for complacency. The fight for control of the jungle was not yet over. The radio intermittently brought voices of other commanders reporting movements, and suddenly a new order echoed. "Return to base. We need to secure the central areas." A shockwave went through the troops. The colonel realized that taking the main base would allow them to consolidate their positions and decide on the next offensive to end the Viet Cong resistance. The battle danced between light and darkness, and the atmosphere was charged with emotion. Victory seemed within reach, but it could dissipate at any moment. The colonel's unit, amid the destruction, made a silent vow. "We will not let the sacrifice of our comrades be in vain." And so, as the gunfire intensified, both sides continued to fight. With tensions at their peak, the question still echoed. Could they overcome the challenges and change their fate in this night battle? And so, the dance of destiny unfolded in the shadows, where the light of triumph might finally shine. As the battle raged, the situation around the Viet Cong base became a proving ground of faith, resilience, and adaptability. Both sides were determined, but on that night, the sounds of war didn't just echo. They told a complex story of bravery and despair. The American soldiers, driven by a fighting spirit, pushed forward, but the nature of the enemy was becoming clearer. The Viet Cong were more than just fighters. They were cunning guerrillas, renowned for their ability to infiltrate and strike from the shadows. In the rear, the Viet Cong command watched the fight with apprehension. A shrewd and calculating commander observed his soldiers fighting with a fervor that mixed fear and determination. "We are outgunned, but the advantage is not in the weapon but in the strategy. We must adapt, we must be ghosts," he exclaimed to his team. With those words, plans emerged to reshape their approach and attempt a new offensive. The use of their knowledge of the terrain, which the Viet Cong had perfected at the cost of such sacrifice, was becoming an invaluable advantage. "Fall back! To the tunnels! Use the ambush points!" The order cut through the air, decisive yet risky. The American soldiers realized that a strategic retreat might be the last thing they expected. The battle was still fierce, but the desire to become an avenging spirit against their vulnerability had turned into a collective cry. The battlefield had become a chaotic labyrinth, where friend and foe intertwined like a real-time chess match. The American troops, still fixated on their goal of taking the base, held firm in their assaults. Every shot they fired was an effort not only to advance but to deliver a psychological blow to the guerrillas who hoped to inch closer to victory. However, as the battle unfolded, the pressure mounted. Captain James, now more seasoned, realized that the battle wasn't just a physical test. It was a matter of patience, endurance, and rational thinking. As the last light of day vanished and darkness began to swallow the jungle, a new layer of complexity took hold. Back at command, the planning room, thick with cigarette smoke and exhaustion, was where tactics aimed for results. "We need a coordinated strike on the target. Their positions are vulnerable, but any misstep will seal our fate," an analyst stated, drawing new lines on a bullet-marked map. The dialogue crackled with intensity as the unit tried to restructure for a coordinated attack that would be not just an advance but a demonstration of control. And so, amid the confusion, a surprising turn of events began to solidify. The colonel broke free from his cautious restraints and spurred his troops to a renewed offensive. "Somewhere on this battlefield, the VC are waiting for our next move. Let's break their game, let's take them down." And now, with a new fire, each American soldier suppressed the doubt that lingered in their minds, replacing it with a call to advance, fueled by their courage and the memory of the fallen. As the final push occurred, gunfire tore through the night, and the cries of each soldier echoed in a chorus of determination. For them was the motivation driving their steps, but on the other side, a different narrative was unfolding. "They are only men," the Viet Cong repeated to one another, reinforcing their resolve amidst the pressure. The technological disadvantage that was so apparent became a burden, but also an impetus for new strategies. For the Viet Cong, victory was a flexible concept, reinterpreted by the very act of struggle, and the fight between the hammer and the anvil became a myriad of reflections of confidence and survival. From a defensive position, their attacks became more akin to ambushes than direct combat. The dynamic of the fight was transforming into a masterpiece of skill over weaponry. As the bullets continued to echo, the ambition of both sides became a revealing dance of vulnerabilities and bravery. Then, with a shattering command, the colonel united his forces in a coordinated movement, his voice echoing with brutal finality. "Forward, full force!" But the war, as if taking on a new life, revealed a twist. Word came down from high command. A heavy artillery strike was imminent. "Air support is on its way. We're taking that base, whatever the cost," a command officer growled, his words echoing with both hope and fear. Suddenly, the deafening sound of bombardment thundered, bringing the cry of resistance to the forefront of despair. The battle for supremacy not only raised its stakes, but created a mirror of the struggle on both sides, where victory seemed like the tail of a comet, pulling away. They had fought bravely, but now hope began to fray, and the warrior's resolve would need all its courage to face an undefined horizon. The sun had not yet risen, but the war was nowhere near over. The true test of adaptability lay ahead, and the night, still so relentless, promised more. Wielding a newfound determination, the American troops prepared for what promised to be the climax of this frantic battle. The jungle began to brighten with the first hints of dawn, but the morning's serenity was a lie. Beneath the calm lay a war zone consumed by uncertainty, where every man felt the weight of the sacrifices made by his comrades. The echoes of screams, bullets, and explosions now seemed like tales from ancient fables, but they were indelible marks on their souls. "This isn't just a fight for victory, but to preserve who we are," the colonel murmured to his soldiers, stoking the morale that threatened to dissipate. The man at his side, James, felt the pressure on his shoulders increase. The words of hope fought against the cruel reality of the battlefield. "We need to stick together, not just as soldiers but as brothers," he replied, reminding everyone that unity and courage were the true forces that would fuel their fight. Meanwhile, the Viet Cong leadership also faced challenges. "Adaptation is our only choice. They have machines, but we have the knowledge of our land," a commander stated, a new strategy in mind that could not only prevent American advances, but also establish a way to ensure survival and, perhaps, a secure victory. In the moments preceding a new offensive, an electrifying anticipation hung in the air like a flashpoint. The American forces reconfigured their line of attack, splitting into smaller, more agile groups. They had decided that the element of surprise could be the key against the Viet Cong fortifications. The first exchange of fire was swift and brutal. The American troops infiltrated, using the skills acquired over months of training. Ammunition was fired in relentless bursts, and determination exacted its price. But the field, now dimly lit by the morning light, echoed with threats of indomitable resistance. James, filled with determination, threw himself along the front line. The fight became visceral, a confrontation not just between men, but a conflict of ideals. He remembered his colonel, who always reiterated that this battle transcended the physical fight, and every blow struck was a fight for the values that defined their existence. As minutes turned into hours, the uncertainty in the air solidified once more. Bombs exploded near the base, but the resistance remained robust. The Viet Cong's battle cry was motivated by the passion to fight for their land. "They are our brothers and sisters, our people," a commander shouted amid the shock. The battle unfolded in a chaotic dance, where each side nullified the other. The American superiority in weaponry and technology, even with assets like attack helicopters and bombers, was clashing with guerrilla cunning, which infiltrated the shadows and used the forest to launch ambushes. The Viet Cong were determined to fight, each of them believing they could turn the tide. As a new American airstrike prepared to hit, and the deafening sound of jets tore through the sky, both sides braced for the final shock. The colonel, now deep on the line, shouted orders, while his troops dispersed in response. "Hold fast. Remember our own. The weight of every life lost is a weight we must carry with honor." Focused on determination and fear, the battlefield became a scene of extreme contrasts. Hearts pounded with fury, but also with the weight of despair. The final blow was about to be dealt from both sides. But deep in the jungle, where the battle was not just a matter of force, human voices found torturous echoes. Neither side could emerge completely victorious. The nature of war had burrowed into the soul of a society, where every heart beat to the rhythm of uncertainty. What emerged was a new perception. The only certainty was the pain and the high cost of choosing to fight, losing sight of the true purpose, life itself. With the daylight growing and the shadows receding, the war was not over. The verbal and ideological conflict would give way to a resonance of lost lives, where questions would remain unanswered. Victory, at what cost, hung in the air, as defiant as a shadow across the jungle, while the echoes of resistant voices continued to reverberate. The legacy of the battle would be cemented in whispers of bravery and the wreckage of interconnected lives, a memory of a cycle that seemed to have no end. The scars would remain, but so too would the search for peace echo in the forests that witnessed the struggle, where the deep roots and resilient spirit of humanity break through not just battles, but renewed hopes.